which is an architectural salvage yard run by a guy called John. I've never been to their salvage yard, never been.
In 2024, Drew Pritchard did something that shocked his fans. He sold everything. The fairground boat, the vintage signs, even pieces from Buckingham Palace, all gone. Over 620 items raised $800,000. But it wasn't about money. It was surrender. The affairs, the divorce, the pub ban, the closed shop, it all led to this moment. The king of British salvage was selling his soul. What drove him to auction off his life's passion will leave you heartbroken. This wasn't just business. This was goodbye. Drew Pritchard was born in February 1970 in the old town of Conwy, North Wales. He grew up in a small house under the shadow of medieval castles where times were tough and money was always tight. His parents ran a tiny corner shop that barely made enough to get by. In the 1970s, the area was struggling badly. Jobs were disappearing and a lot of families, including his, had to scrape just to stay warm in winter. Drew was only 8 years old when he started looking at junk differently. While other kids played games, Drew searched through flea markets and dumps. By 1978, he had collected over 500 bottle caps and used them like money at school. Some neighbors thought he was just a strange kid with a weird obsession. But no one really understood what was happening inside his head. Behind it all was a secret he carried from his grandfather, a World War II veteran who had once smuggled war artifacts back from Europe. He told young Drew stories about hidden treasures and forgotten history. These stories lit a fire in Drew that never went out. He started sneaking into old scrapyards and abandoned places. Once, escaping from a pile of falling junk that almost buried him alive. By the time he was 12, he had a personal collection of war items and old coins, worth over $200. He even began selling the extras to make pocket money. In the middle of a broken-down town, Drew was quietly building the start of something big. At home, things weren't any easier. His family's income was barely $5,000 a year during the 1970s, which meant no luxuries, barely enough heating, and a lot of sacrifice. His dad worked as a signwriter. He painted beautiful pub signs with real gold leaf. When Drew was 6, he started watching him work. That's when his love for restoring old things truly began. But what no one talked about was how dangerous those paints were. The lead in them damaged his dad's health, giving him tremors. By 1980, Drew saw it all. At just 10 years old, he began sneaking tools from his dad's kit to fix broken toys. He once got electrocuted while working on an old wind-up car from the 1950s and had to get stitches. He also started picking apart broken bikes from neighbors' trash, storing them in the backyard until the place looked like a junkyard. It got so bad that people complained about rats. Still, Drew couldn't stop. By the time he was 12, he had fixed and sold about 50 items at markets and made over $300. His father's way of mixing art and restoration left a deep mark on him. But Drew didn't always understand the risks. He used dangerous varnishes and breathed in toxic fumes without knowing what they could do to him. Then in 1982, a flood hit their family shop and destroyed stock worth $1,000. While his parents were devastated, Drew jumped into action. He salvaged everything he could. That moment showed what kind of man he was going to become. At school, things didn't go so well. Drew started at Iskall Aberranwy in 1975, but his grades were terrible. By 1980, he was in the bottom 10% of the class. No one knew he had dyslexia back then, so teachers just thought he was lazy or distracted. What they didn't see was what Drew was doing outside of school. He was skipping classes, over 100 of them, to explore old slate quarries. In one of them, he found a hidden World War II bunker full of dangerous objects. He didn't tell anyone his name when he reported it, scared of getting in trouble. Art was the only subject where Drew truly shined. His drawings of broken-down Victorian buildings were so good that in 1983 he won a regional prize and $50. But even his adventures were dangerous. In 1984, he fell through the rotten floor of an old mill and broke his arm. He never told anyone, afraid he'd be banned from exploring again. By 15, he had explored 40 abandoned places and gathered artifacts worth around $500. He made treasure maps and led his classmates on wild hunts. These adventures nearly got him expelled, but they also built the bold, curious spirit that helped him later become a millionaire. At 15, Drew started working part-time at a car restoration garage in Llandudno. It was 1985. And he earned $2 an hour working long days in the summer surrounded by oil, metal, and sparks. He learned how to fix classic cars, including old Jaguars from the 1950s. By 1986, he had helped restore 20 cars. But the job wasn't without risk. One welding accident badly burned his hand, leaving a scar he still has today. Around that time, he fixed his first old furniture piece, a 1920s oak chair, and sold it for a $100 profit. The garage owner, a former race car driver, shared wild stories about smuggling car parts that made Drew's imagination run even wilder. By the time he was 16, Drew had saved $800 and spent it on proper tools. But he didn't realize the garage was involved in shady deals. He had unknowingly worked with stolen parts. In 1987, the police raided the shop and seized $10,000 worth of goods. That was the final straw. Drew quit and never looked back. But the skills he had picked up there would shape the rest of his life. That same year, 1986, Drew found something that changed everything. A dusty Victorian gas lamp buried under 2 tons of junk in a local yard. It turned out to be a real antique from the 1880s made by designer William Sugg. He sold it for $50 and used the money to buy better tools. That same year, he salvaged 15 more items and made about $400, but that junkyard was full of asbestos. And later on, Drew admitted he feared he had damaged his health working there. He also had help from an old junk dealer who taught him to look deeper, showing him how some objects had secret compartments, maybe even hiding smuggled gems. His parents didn't support what he was doing. When they argued about it, Drew packed a few things and lived in his van for a week. But that didn't stop him. By 1987, he had made 50 deals and collected $2,000 from selling restored antiques. At a time when youth unemployment in Wales was nearly 15%, Drew had already found a way to survive and thrive. By 1988, when he turned 18, Drew officially stepped into the world of antiques. He didn't go to college or get fancy training. Instead, he joined a stained glass restorer as an apprentice. The job started small. He cleaned dusty vases and carried heavy doors. But when a van pulled up one day with the words "Architectural Antiques" written on it, something clicked. He realized this wasn't just a job. It was a hidden world, full of secrets, rare objects, and skilled craftsmen. Over the next 7 years, Drew worked on everything from stained glass windows to grand fireplaces in old houses. He didn't just learn how to restore things. He learned how to spot value where others saw junk. Also in 1988, Drew made his first solo buy. He found a set of broken Georgian chairs and paid just $100 for them. He spent weeks fixing them, sanding, carving, and bringing them back to life. When he finally sold them for $300, it proved he was on the right path. But this trading spirit had started years earlier. Back in school at age 12, he used to trade dinner tickets to buy boots. He listened to punk bands like The Jam and Madness, thinking of ways to turn small wins into big moves. This same thinking helped him open his first small showroom by 1993, just 5 years later. Then came 1990. At 20, Drew did something most wouldn't dare. He took his old van, drove all the way to France, with almost no money and zero French language skills, and went treasure hunting. He hit markets in Normandy and found rare Art Deco lamps and furniture for under $500. He somehow got everything back to Wales, even though customs officers questioned his cargo. He had no real paperwork, but his charm pulled him through. When he sold the items back home, he tripled his money. This trip opened his eyes to the bigger picture. He wasn't just a local picker anymore. He started buying from places like Norway and Na, building a network that stretched across Europe. But not every deal was a win. In 1991, when Drew was 21, he lost $500 when a shipment of French ceramics arrived completely smashed. He had packed them poorly and they were all ruined. It was like a punch to the gut. That kind of money meant everything to him back then. Still, instead of quitting, he took the broken pieces and turned them into mosaic art. He sold them at markets, turning disaster into something beautiful. By 1992, just 22 years old, Drew had a small stall at Conway Market. He sold mid-century furniture like old teak tables and retro chairs. He bought pieces for $20 and sold them for 3 times as much. Even though he had no formal education, he had already built a local circle of 50 regular buyers. He still worked on stained glass restoration, often juggling both jobs in freezing weather. He would get up before dawn to arrive at fairs like Newark early, hunting for treasures before the public even got in. It reminded him of those childhood days when he sold bike parts on the roadside just to buy sweets. In 1993, when Drew Pritchard was only 23 years old, he opened his very first antique shop in Conway, North Wales. He only had a $2,000 loan from the local bank and a dream. He had just finished a 7-year apprenticeship fixing stained glass and started searching for old, forgotten pieces from torn-down buildings. He once even entered a condemned church in Holy and pulled out rare stained glass windows designed by William Morris. They were worth thousands, but it was dangerous. The structure was falling apart. By the end of that year, he had made a $5,000 profit. But it wasn't easy. A rival tried to ruin his loan by spreading lies that Drew didn't know what he was doing. Still, his shop became a hit, and people who were building houses or fixing old ones came to him looking for real, original pieces. His little shop even helped bring more visitors to the town. By 1995, Drew changed how he did business. He started working with demolition crews across the UK. When old buildings were about to be destroyed, Drew would buy the valuable pieces before they were lost forever. One time, he saw 19th-century stained glass windows in a van and bought them for $800. They were designed by Edward Burne-Jones and worth $2,600. He sold them quickly and doubled his money. But not everything went smoothly. At one site, workers found a live bomb from World War II while they were helping Drew gather old iron pieces. It shut things down for days and cost him $1,000 in delays. Still, his collection kept growing. He started saving huge wood beams from barns and cast iron radiators from empty factories. He was now saving over 50 tons of old materials every year and became popular with designers in London. Then came a big setback in 1997. Thieves broke into his shop and stole $1,500 worth of items, including silver candlesticks and brass pieces from an old Liverpool shipyard. The break-in happened on a foggy night. They used crowbars and left everything in a mess. Drew was heartbroken. Insurance only paid $800. He almost went bankrupt. It turned out the thieves were locals and some of the items were found at a nearby pawn shop. Police recovered less than half of them. Drew didn't take any more chances. He bought new security systems for $2,000 and moved part of his collection to safer storage. He even started buying heavy-duty safes to sell. That same year, antique shop thefts rose by 25% in Wales. But Drew refused to give up. By the year 2000, his business had grown a lot. He was now making $50,000 a year. He had found a new love in industrial salvage. He pulled out old lamps from factories in Manchester and machine parts from shipyards in Scotland. Once he bought a giant engine lathe for just $500. It weighed 2 tons. After fixing it up, he sold it for $4,000. That's an 8 times profit. One time a warehouse roof almost fell on him while he was collecting vintage signs. He escaped just in time and saved 100 enamel signs. His client list tripled and celebrities even started buying from him. He now had 2 assistants and was handling over 1,000 pieces every year. But the work wasn't always legal. He got fined $2,000 once for collecting without proper permits.